Okay, my friends, I'm going to show you something about giants and giant viruses, which is something that they have just discovered, which shows that there was a whole nother branch of creatures here that were our contemporaries or before us, and then had gigantic viruses. And I believe they were from the giants, possibly, because I know there was giants here. There's one right here that I went out and harvested the DNA from this, specifically my own self. So you can't blame anybody but me if it's wrong. It's here. Anybody can test it. You can take the DNA blood right out of the arterial supply. This is the fingernail. That's the fingernail. It's 36 inches long. 36 inches. And that is the fingertip. And I have the fingerprints from it here, and I'll show you in a second. And I do deep research on this. Let me show you something that's coal. You want to see something? You could test yourself. All you got to do is go get some coal, and you can see that I'm right. You see that? They say, oh, that's just a piece of coal. I said, no, it isn't. That is one time was a fingertip, and this is blood. All right, and that was a bone, and that is the center of it. Now, I'll show it to you. So just a very small thing. It's in the microscope here. See, I just moved it. You see it? And that is the tip is broken off at the front. Now, I'll show it in a couple other different ways. And I have other fingers here that I will show you what happens when they crystallize inside. But the blood always seems to stay. And I put a little water on it, it'll turn red. And this is where I got my samples from. I didn't just swab anything. I cut something or drilled into something and then took the sample out. The gigantic fingertip that I have right here, I smashed a chunk off with a sledgehammer. Yeah, real sophisticated. And I've got the fingerprints from it, and then up inside I took the arterial blood out of it. This is not a big thing to do this. And it's grip skin. There's no question what it is. Nobody, and you know, anatomists, everybody agrees with it. And the DNA test came back as human. And he said it was dense for ancient DNA. They did PCR tests on the two different regions, and the mitochondrial DNA was human and identical to our human. No difference whatsoever. So even though it is gigantic, it had the same human mother line as us. That's what I understand. Now, if somebody wants to take a look at it, that's what I was hoping for. Not a single person stood up. This was 5 years ago. I had the DNA test done, CAT scans of all the pieces that because I have more than this, and this is just one of a ton of stuff that I have. So anyway, let me show you the fingerprints. There it is. There's this grip skin from the gigantic fingertip that I smashed off with the sledgehammer. I think it's a 16-pound sledge if you want details. And that's the grip skin. What can I say? That's what it is, and that's what it is. And that is the thickness of that guy's grip skin. A giant skin. Now, it lays just like that. It just lays flat like that against the fleshy area underneath your skin. That is a very tough layer on your skin. And there's a lot of silicon, and I believe there's also a lot of iridium. Because iridium, there was a layer of iridium on the Earth, and I believe that iridium came from the flood, not from any impact of a giant meteorite. We'll talk about that later. That's a whole nother story. But this right here is the grip skin. What it is what it is. I showed you the fingertip. You can see the fingernail. If you see fingerprints on the other side of a fingernail, I would say that's probably a finger. And then when it gets DNA tested and it says it's human, I would probably pretty much consider that conclusive. All right, there's no sense in showing the guy's name that did the test because they're bothering him. But this was one of the things that was done, which was this lung. There was that 36-inch tip that I showed you, this gigantic one that had the fingerprints. And then there was this other one, which is another one here. This is a fingertip. This is all CAT scan, DNA certified, tested. We took it from up inside, the DNA. And the same thing with this. We took it from a spot up inside the red bloody place of the lung, a little pin drill up inside. and they were dense, and there was no problem with it. And it was very, and as far as I know, I might have said this already, but as far as I know, I think this was the first DNA test done on any ancient human samples. Now they do it all the time now, it's just pretty regular, but I was attacked like crazy. Oh, it's impossible. I said, oh, no, it's not. And I have literal blood from these things coming out of them. I'm not kidding you. This lung was literally like almost blood coming out of here. And I have other ones. I think they drilled a hole right up into there. But I have another one here that it literally had the blood coming out of it. Hold on a second. I mean literal blood. All right, these lungs, everything I have here came off my own property. This is a lung that the blood just gushed out of it. The alveoli is obviously right here. You can see the little circles, just like this. This is the same things. Now, one area had the red blood, and it apparently drained like this way so that the blood ran down into that section, and it just left this to collect with the quartz. Now, this is another lung, not from the same creature. It was from another one. It was literally perfect. You see that fabric? They call that feldspar. That is fascia, and it's on everything that I have. Everything that there is that was the surface of a body part or a creature is covered with fascia, just like this rock right here. That is some form of a body part. And the only place that has the fascia on it is the surface, because it's just like the surface of that. Inside is all this basalt, that's igneous, metamorphic, this. But there's always fascia on the surface. So it's time to look at geology in a new light. Now, I showed you this finger, this one here. That came from this hand. And I have other stuff. I have knuckles, and I have other parts from the body. Now, this right here is same as yours. And then you have this thing that runs down here, a little tendon. And then this is the grip skin. Remember I showed you how thick and, like that grip skin just peels right off. You see it? It just peels right off. Now, why is it silver looking and this stuff is all brown looking? Well, first of all, this is fleshy underneath. But the grip skin itself is loaded with silicon and fibrous, really tough stuff. And it's a different fabric than below, very different. But anyway, that's where your thumb runs off here. That's the hand, that's the palm. And this is only up to about here. All right, this is way up here, and then your fingers start. 36 inches wide. DNA certified. I took the samples myself, so nobody can blame the lab if I'm lying or this isn't correct. But I am willing to have anybody test it that's willing to do a legitimate test. All right, this is a giant hand, which I showed you already, or I will, and they have found giant viruses. I can't find any blood difference specifically between this and the stuff that I have here that are the size of us. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to have somebody expert check it out. All right, at some point I will mention that I did a blood study on giants versus normal sized creatures here that I have that were mud fossils, and I really couldn't determine any significant difference. I didn't spend much time doing it, it's an honest admission, but I need somebody specific and expert to look. If the blood is different in my giants than the blood of today's people, maybe that would be something different. I didn't see any difference. Maybe I'm wrong. See how cool this is? Look at this. That's your thing that goes down your hand. There's a little piece that goes right down the middle. This is the thing around, and that it almost look. It almost looks like it's pasted on there. Look at it. And that's that bumpy spot. The bumper on your palm. And like I say, the fingers from this are DNA certified. The gigantic one, DNA certified. The lung is DNA certified. The anatomists have verified all of these things. There's CAT scans on the parts that were CAT scannable. I had 7 CAT scans done. It's time to take this a little more serious. I mean, it's ridiculous. 10 years now it's going on. Okay, my friends, Roger once again. They're talking about this things that happen to me cannot be explained by just coincidence. I just did a video, and I don't know if I showed it yet or I'm going to show it, but I was talking about this particular microscope because I've been using this a lot, showing a lot of pictures from this. And this microscope is a 3D thing. It works very well. And then I have this really fancy one. And I was saying, talking about, I really only use this one. I very rarely use this one. And I said, because all you can really see is these kind of slides. And then I picked this up and I said, I did a while back, I did a study, a blood study. And one of the things that I said was, the funny thing is, giant blood doesn't seem to be any bigger than regular blood. And I said, gee, I found that kind of interesting. And then all of a sudden I get this from Wayne Unger, a friend of mine. And this is all about giant viruses and how they evolved along with the viruses we have now, but they went out of phase because there was probably no giants left. This is just crazy. Wait till I show you what it says. The reason I was talking about giants and giant blood and giant this and giant that, well, because the Earth literally is, Gaia is the Earth, and there was giants all over the Earth, but it seems that the blood, wasn't, there's not enough football-sized blood cells, but there are gigantic tendon balls and gigantic everything else, but it doesn't seem the blood. That's what's just very strange to me. Anyway, that's why I had mentioned it in my other video when I was showing the microscopes. Now, this is what the one that Wayne sent me, and I'm going to let it play. They're looking into these giant viruses because they found one in one specific area. And you know what? I got to show you where he was when he went out to collect it, because he went right out where the giant footprint was. There was a giant foot. Maybe I have to go back to that. But anyway, let's just play this for here. Here goes.
Trait of mimivirus. Morgan Gaia is a young microbiologist at the Pasteur Institute. Alongside Patrick Forterre, he works on the parental links between viruses with the help of cutting-edge data processing tools.
Parental links between viruses. On this wall, they made the first virus that they knew of, and then how it split into things that had different viruses and different bacterias and different all that business. But now they find this giant bacteria, and it goes on the wall to start a whole nother complete beginning of life, which was a whole different branch than the little bacteria, little viruses.
He is a respected authority in the debate around giant viruses and their place in the tree of life. Like Patrick Forterre, he believes it necessary to group together already known large viruses and giant viruses in a single family called Megaviralis.
This is the beginning of all life, is what they say, and it goes off to the eukaryotes and all this business. This is a whole nother branch of life, basically, is what he's saying.
In my opinion, mimivirus and the Megaviralis have their place here, at this particular place, because they happen to infect a large range of eukaryotes, which suggests
Eukaryotes are us.
that the first ancestors of giant viruses were already infecting the first eukaryotic cells. Obviously, this is a minimum position. We can just as easily imagine that the ancestors of Megaviralis were also infecting cells before this separation between eukaryotes and archaea. And of course, we can stretch this hypothesis still further to the possibility of the ancestors of Megaviralis infecting Leuca.
If giant
Basically, they found this new mega virus that is just so gigantic it can't work in the human body now, apparently. I don't know, maybe it can. but it's a total different line of life than us.
Giant viruses had their place in the tree, and furthermore their ancestors were present at the time of Luca, then they could indeed belong to a new branch of life. Better still, if they were capable of infecting Luca, of interacting with it, then they might just be able to help us find out what it was like, help us to find the key to Luca's portrait.
They said that they mated with the Earthlings and the giants and...
In any case, the hypothesis of a fourth domain of life, which these first giant viruses evoked, was causing a stir.
The thing about viruses is that the fact that they have very few genes means that it's extremely difficult to construct a tree of the history of this gene. Whereas Mimivirus has so many genes, these giant viruses have so many genes, that it's possible to make a link between bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. And they constitute a separate branch. That's to say, it's clearly not derived from something which existed before. 4 branches are born, one carrying the genes of giant viruses, another the genes of archaea, another the genes of eukaryotes, and another the genes of bacteria.
At the time of the discovery of Mimivirus and its close cousin Mammavirus, Chantal Abergel and Jean-Michel Claverie were also seduced by the hypothesis of a fourth domain. With the discoveries which followed, they gradually came up with another version of what might have happened around Luca, which would position giant viruses not at the level of a fourth domain, but simply as the losers of evolution.
There you go right there, the losers of evolution, which means that, you know, giants, although you'd think they would be not vulnerable, probably must have been pretty vulnerable because they happened to, they appear to have been killed out. And a lot of stories of how the little people killed them. And there's one right here in my neighborhood in Connecticut. They have Sleeping Giant State Park, which is, and the story behind it is Hockomock was the giant that lived here, and he's the one that's laying there down in New Haven. And they said they had to kill him because he was raiding their villages, and one day he stepped in the Connecticut River and redirected the whole river. That's what they say. That's the story. But apparently they were the losers of evolution. And they talk about killing off the red-haired giants and all of this stuff, and you know, and they trying to kill off the serpents and all these dragons, and you know, those were the stories. And I'm finding that the stories have a lot of substance to them. It's time to start to look at them a little bit differently. All right, let's see what we got.
What we're suggesting is that there could have been alternative contemporary life forms on Earth.
Contemporary alternative life forms on Earth that died out. That's what she's saying. Now, I like her.
Which at a given moment found themselves in competition, and that it was one of these life forms, one of these proto-cells which produced Luca, which is the ancestor of cellular life, and that the others, the losers of the competition, in order to survive, were obliged to become parasites on the winners, in order to propagate their genome and continue to exist in association, albeit transitory, with the cellular world.
All right, so they're saying that somehow they incorporated back into our gene pool, apparently, where before they were outside of it. That, maybe I'm reading that wrong, but regardless, we got giant, you know, viruses, and we got normal size. So that's, you know, we had giant things, and you know, I cannot see with my microscopes, even the best one I have here, which is very, very powerful. I can't see a difference in size of these things. I can't see down into viruses. They're very, very small. But the blood cells, I didn't see any gigantic blood cells. I didn't really look all that hard. I got to be honest with you. I just briefly looked at them. I said, this stuff it's all looking the same, and I just let it go. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody look at it a little closer and they'll find it altogether different.
The debate is still open, but the idea of a close link between giant viruses and the world of cells has been confirmed by new discoveries which place the world of giant viruses in close proximity with ourselves. A new agent was flushed out in human blood. The alien was in us.
I want to tell you right now, I had mitochondrial DNA tests done on what I harvested personally. I just collected the samples, and I collected them extremely well, clean, no contamination, and they were taken right out of the arterial blood supply of my giant human beings. I sent them off, and they came back as human mitochondrial DNA, and I mean, it was very well done. 3 different tests. So let's just go back a second and play that again, because this is important. We understand what our past was like. This makes a big difference. This makes a huge difference.
Of contemporary life forms on Earth, which at a given moment found themselves in competition, and that it was one of these life forms, one of these proto-cells which produced LUCA, which is the ancestor of cellular life, and that the others, the losers of the competition, in order to survive, were obliged to become parasites on the winners, in order to propagate their genome and continue to exist in association, albeit transitory, with the cellular world.
Okay, they became parasites.
The debate is still open, but the idea of a close link between giant viruses and the world of cells has been confirmed by new discoveries which place the world of giant viruses in close proximity with ourselves. A new agent was flushed out in human blood. The alien was in us. Discovered at the transfusion centre in Marseille, it was simply named Marseille virus. After extensive study, Marseille virus proved to be smaller than Mimi and Mama virus, and most importantly, its genome was what is called chimeric. It contained a mosaic of genes, one part coming from the viral world, another from the cellular world.
All right, it basically looks to me like they're just starting to really fully understand the complexity of these little organisms. And I think that they still don't understand fully how the virus takes over a ribosome. It takes over some kind of organelle, and I believe it's a ribosome in the cells. It doesn't just float around in the cytoplasm and the little fluids. I believe it takes over the ribosome and it captures the processor that creates the ribosomes and turns them into virus creators. That's the only thing I can see, and well, that's the only thing I can think of, because that's what it has to be a little factory in there, and that's what ribosomes are. That's what organelles are. They're little factories. So it's taken over some kind of a little factory inside of the cells, but it has to punch into the cell first to get inside. That's where the protection layer is on the membranes. Something's got to be done at that membrane to protect us.
Marseille virus is very problematic for us, because for one thing we started finding it in blood given by donors, and then we found it in the ganglion of a kid with adenitis. We're now working on complications of these infections. It's in
the blood supply, it sounds like. That's not good.
For example of the fact that when you open your eyes on a world that you refuse to look at, you don't just find things, you find heaps of things.
You see that? What did he just say? In a world you refuse to look at? That's what's been going on. They refuse to look into these things. Hold on. If I heard that right, I think I did.
Marseille, it was simply named Marseille virus. After extensive study, Marseille virus proved to be smaller than Mimi and Mama virus, and most importantly, its genome was what is called chimeric. It contained a mosaic of genes, one part coming from the viral world, another from the cellular world.
Marseille virus is very problematic for us, Because for one thing, we started finding it in blood given by donors. And then we found it in the ganglion of a kid with adenitis. We're now working on complications of these infections. It's another example of the fact that when you open your eyes on a world that you refuse to look at,
There you go. When you open your eyes in a world that you refuse to look at, you find so much, it blows your eyes right out of your head.
you don't just find things, you find heaps of things.
They have to start looking and stop dismissing everything. It only takes a
Could
second to
giant
look at
viruses be
90% of things.
In every one of the planet's environments? Wherever there's a potential host? If that is the case, then researchers cannot ignore an environment which occupies 70% of the planet. Consequently, in 2010, vast sampling campaigns crisscrossed the seas of the world. Marine samples delivered 3 new agents. From the deep waters of the South Pacific came the enormous megavirus Chilensis. Even bigger.
All right, you just heard what they're saying. They're searching all around the world for these different viruses because they realize they have hosts. They showed something almost exactly. Well, maybe it's right here. Hold on. I gotta find it. But they went up to one of these mountains and they're digging in the mountain.
Another researcher now took on a key role. Jean-Michel Claverie. At that time, he had just come back from the USA, where he had taken part in the adventure of sequencing the human genome. Along with Chantal Labergelle, he completely sequenced Mimivirus, establishing a precise identity card for this astonishing little monster.
All right, this is the virus they found in one specific place, and that's all that's the only place they could find it. Never anywhere else could they find it. So then they decided to go looking for it. Now I've got to find the correct place. This is kind of long. I'll jump right back. Stay with me. All right, here it is right here. He's going out to harvest samples of these giant viruses. Look where he's going. He's coming out here and looking around in these trees. All he's got to do is to go up to there and look down and find it, and they'll be in the blood supply if they're going to be a virus.
Like Mimi, it was necessary to find their hideouts. And it was known that they liked to be around amoebas. So the first...
But here's where he should have been, back up here that's where they're going to be coming from. You know, they're going to be coming down, that's fine. But the closer you get to the source, and this would be the source of the giant. If there's giant ones, that's from a giant. I don't care what anybody says. That is from a giant body. Some part of the giant, I don't know what it is, but it was from a giant.